Hello, everybody. We are live on YouTube with one more day of the Agile Online Summit live stream. We're going to attend a workshop today, as well as we're going to do a watch along. We're going to watch the closing keynote for the summit here on the live stream, and we can have a conversation. You can ask questions, and do ask questions here on the stream. That helps us get a little bit more, conversation going on. I'm happy to share my thoughts as well as links, ideas, pointers to some of the things that we're going to tackle today. But before we get into any of that, let's quickly review what our program is for today. So first we start with the how diverse is your organizational mindset? Diversity for Agile coaches. This is a workshop that Dimple Shah will facilitate for us, and we'll attend that workshop live here on the YouTube channel. And you can participate through the chat. Just send over your questions, your comments, your observations, and we'll put those forward to the workshop organizer, Dimple Shah. Don't forget that if you're watching this live, at the same time, we have the Agile Coaching Clinic, and I'll put the link for you to register if you want to hop on to the Agile Coaching Clinic, and I'll put the link so that you can go register and hop into that Agile Coaching Clinic yourself if you want. But we will have more. So let me just put the link here on the chat. There you go. The link is now on the chat, and you are able to attend that live coaching clinic with Bob Kalen and world-class coaches that are there to help you. So don't forget, take advantage of that. It's live and it's going on now. So just go hop over to that link I just put on the chat, the YouTube chat, and register yourself, and you will be able to attend that Agile Coaching Clinic. We also have quite a lot of content. Just now going on is the Linda Aspey keynote. She talks about how we can apply our agile coaching skills in the complex environment that is climate change. So hop over to that. You can find our YouTube channel link in the chat. Let me just copy that for you. Let me just do that right now. And there we go. Right there on the YouTube chat, you have the link to be able to watch the keynote that is just ending with Linda Aspey. Later on, we will have Tamsin Woolley Barker, which is an evolutionary anthropologist, and she will talk to us about how nature's teams stay agile, and we will watch this keynote together. So that will be a watch along here on the channel together with everybody else that is joining. And of course, as I said, don't hesitate to send your questions, comments, and feedback. Let's have a joint watch of this keynote. But there's also other talks today. So on the sustainability track, we have Jutta Axchin, a great agilist and a person I very much admire, has contributed a lot to our community. And she talks about how to get more socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable based on data. One of my favorite talks of this year's Agile Online Summit is David Musik's Fighting Climate Change with the Help of Agile. Definitely worth watching, and a few mind-blowing statements from David right there. And they're using Agile to help improve the or reduce the emissions in one big industry, the concrete industry. We'll also have on the tools track Dustin Johnson talking about value stream capitalization, death to timesheets. I like the subtitle. And he talks about investment and how to track that in software companies. So check that out. Then we have in the happiness track, we have Dave Westgarth how to theme your retros, fresh ideas and approaches to drive engagement and continuous improvement in your retrospective sessions. And the final session on that track will be Nicole Wilker's Your Must Have Skills. And I like that you already have. A great reminder of some of the skills that we need and already have. So don't forget, just before we get into the workshop with Dimple, do press that like button if you like the content, as well as subscribe. We have a goal of getting to 1,500 subscribers during the summit. Let's see if we can reach that. So please, if you're watching, do click that subscribe button. And if you like the video, also click the like button so that people can find those videos. And now we're going to join the Zoom call with Dimple. Hello, Dimple. Oh, you're on mute. Hey. Hey, Rick. Hey, Barry as well. So we're live on YouTube in the Summit stream. And I wanted to ask you for a very short intro. What can people expect from this workshop? All right. Thank you very much, Dimple. We're looking forward to participate also from the YouTube channel on this workshop. So Dimple was sharing how she expects to tackle the similarities and differences between the topic of sustainability and agility. Sorry, of diversity, that is the topic, and agility. And she's going to explore how those topics are so important and how they can be worked on together for us as Agile coaches. Diversity and Agile coaching are two of her favorite topics, and she's going to explore those with us today. So we'll give it a couple of minutes for people to join the workshop, and then we'll be part of the workshop here in the YouTube live stream. If you have any questions,
Hello,
any
Mary,
thoughts or
welcome.
observations, don't forget, you can always ask the questions here on chat, and I will be sure to bring them to the workshop so that Dimple and the participants can be part of the discussion and reflection with us.
I was just going to check with you, Vasco. Started almost at time.
You are the MC, so
You're on mute.
whenever you think is the right time, then that's the right time. Just whenever you're ready.
Oh, I'm ready whenever you are. So I was just waiting for you. My apologies.
Yeah,
Welcome.
no worries.
Welcome everyone, and hello to everyone who is probably watching us on YouTube live. I am so grateful that you all decided to spend the next 1 hour or so with us over here. And let me share my screen so we can get started here. My name is Dimple, We are going to talk about, like I mentioned, two of my favorite topics, diversity and agility. And I'm hoping that at the end of the session, I hope that there's a lot of interaction throughout the session, but I'm also hoping at the end of the session, I'm able to trigger some of your brain and some of your heart cells along the way. So, a little about me. That's my beautiful family over there on the right top. My husband and I, both of us have been in IT. So there's always been a healthy challenge between the both of us right when we got out of college with our bachelor's, where he was a Microsoft person and I was a Java person. Safe to say that that challenge and that competition is still going. My handsome sixth grader, he is in love with Harry Potter. As you can see over there, one of his favorite spots in Disney. I'm one of the few ones who can proudly call two countries my home. I've been brought up in India, born and raised in India, and I get to call United States of America my home since over 17 years now. Like I mentioned, I'm a proud mom of 11-year-old. It's very low maintenance, one of my best friends. Love music. I'm an avid reader, and I'm very, 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 very loyal to my coffee. I have no pets. So why I'm really here, right? Let's take a deeper dive to what this session I'm hoping is going to be all about. I can very well say I'm here because I'm an enterprise agile coach. Great. That's not what I'm here for, though. I'm actually here because along the way, I have experience, just like we all have. I hope in our lives that we will often forget what people will tell us. We'll often forget what they did for us, but we'll never forget what people, how they made us feel, according to Maya Angelou, which I truly, truly, truly believe in. Real quick, Vasco, would you be entering people into the room? I'm getting pop-ups where there are people in the waiting room.
I can't do that.
You and
Unfortunately,
me.
you have to do that as you are the host.
Okay, all right, got it. I'm glad I asked. Okay, I'm going to keep this window on the side so that I can keep my eye on. Hello, everyone who's newly joined us. So thankful to see some of you all on camera. Hi. And thank you for spending the next 1 hour
Unfortunately, you
with
have
us
to do
over
that
here.
as you are the host.
So as I was saying, my hope for this session for all of us here is to make you a little uncomfortable. Maybe help you, nudge you out gently out of your comfort zone here. And at the end of the session, I hope that you can leave with some of the motivation that you can convert into action steps. And that's why let's start this uncomfortable discussion with the word privilege, right? How often do we think about how privileged we are? And how often do we take a deep breath, sit back, and think about the ones who might not be as privileged as we are? And by privilege, I mean like everything that you can think of. The very fact that you're here on this session means you're a little more privileged than the others. For some of the other reason, if you have insurance, you're privileged. If you were born with one or more disabilities, or you're differently able, then you may be less privileged. If you're a person of color like I am, then you get the idea. And there's several privilege walk videos on YouTube. So if you are not familiar with that kind of exercise, I would highly recommend you to take like 3 to 5 minutes. They're not longer than that. 3 to 5 minutes out of your busy schedule to take a deeper dive within yourself and start asking these questions to yourself, right? And why did I ask about privilege? Why did I start from privilege? So when I entered this world of agility, by accident, completely by accident, a few years back, when I started getting introduced to some of these agile values and principles, the one that stood out to me the most here was the diligence and interactions over processes and tools. And but I didn't think too much into it, and I was like, yeah, maybe it is because I'm super outgoing. I'm a people person, yes, I like it. Now, as I spent more time with people and into the world of agility, and I started seeing some of these challenges, some of this research done around difficulty in adopting agility. On one hand, there were agile adoptions and a lot of numbers and research statistics to show how well it was adopted. On the other hand, a lot of challenges. And almost 43% of the challenge of agile adoption, guess what it was related to? It was related to humans. It was related to individuals. And I kept wondering why. I started listening to these town halls and talks about where leaders and executives they talk nothing about like.
Hey, thank you, Yekaterina, for follow. Thank you very much. Welcome to the channel.
To talk about employee engagement and such. But I realized that when we start talking about agile adoptions and when we talk about diversity, there was very little that was actually done with respect to, okay, how do we do this? How do we go about doing this, right? And that's the reason why I started tying all these knots or untangling these knots and tying all these pieces of puzzles together on what it might look like if we do that. And there were not very many talks or research or webinars or discussions, not nearly enough, at least I would say, around agility and diversity. And we'll explore that. We'll explore why. So let's start with a simple exercise. Go to menti.com and type this code. I'm going to share my screen so that we all can see how we are forming this, right? Thank you for your patience as I navigate through this window. So
Dimple, could you put the code on the chat as well, please? So that we can.
Absolutely. And can you see the code on the top of the screen that I'm sharing right now?
Yeah, can see it.
Okay. All right. So again, go to menti.com, type this code. And let's take a few seconds to think about what does the word diversity mean to you. It should let you give 3 options to type in. Thank you for sharing the website and the code, Vasco. Appreciate it. So yes, go to the site, type in the code that you see on the screen or in the chat window. Celebrate, share, harmony, difference, different. Keep them coming. Teamwork. I love these words. So now let's talk about it. There are more coming in. Thank you. Keep them coming. Inclusion. Love it. Demographics. That's the fact. Variety. Cultures. Inclusive. You think of more words, please feel free to keep sharing them. I'd love that. But let's move on and talk about why did I ask the question in the first place? And what does this mean to us? How can we start really implementing some of these things? And I'm looking back and forth only because I'm trying to toggle between this presentation and Menti. So here we go. As you started typing these words, I want you to think about what that translates for you. And this question is really about you. just about you. Don't think about your team. Don't think about your organization. Just as yet, we're going to cover all the dimensions of diversity and agility mindset. Now, I mentioned about these town halls where we talk about bringing whole self to work, right? What does that really mean? When you see me, who do you see? Do you see an agile coach? Do you see an agile coach who's a woman? Do you see an agile coach who's a woman of color? All of the above, right? Now, when I show up in discussions, in conflicts, in coaching, in any kind of discussions, who do you see then? Especially if we don't agree. Now, I am still all of those, and I am who I am based on the experiences that created me as my whole self, right? And when we have more self-awareness, a fun fact about self-awareness though, over 90% of people in the entire world, they think that they're self-aware, but they're not. So yeah, I was completely flabbergasted when I first heard about
Could
that
you
as well.
repeat that statement, Dimple? 90% of the people thought what?
Over 90% of the people in the world think that they are self-aware, but they're not. There are a lot of studies and research done around that. And I often wonder why that is, right? So when I think about self-awareness, I think about these blind spots, these unconscious biases. Now, think about those blind spots. They are called blind for a reason, because you're blind to them. You can't see them. Unconscious bias is a bias that you have unconsciously. If you were consciously having a bias, that doesn't mean that you really have a bias to begin with, right? So increasing self-awareness is one. When you bring your whole self to work, and then companies or organizations say that, oh yeah, bringing your whole self to work is a choice. Bringing your whole self to work is not a choice, it's a priority. And that norm needs to change. We all are going to mess up at one point or the other. And self-awareness is a constant journey. Recognize it and fix it. That is more important. If you're at the receiving end of some kind of questionable behavior or action, speak up. If you see something that may not be necessarily happening to you, speak up strong. So an interesting story is, and this happened like literally a couple of years back, very recent, I should say. I was in a session with leadership, and I was their coach and their scrum master, and we were having active discussion, and then it got jovial at one point, and there was a comment that was made, and it was just a general comment, but I was a part of the receiving end of that comment, and it came from a person who I have incredible respect for still. Great leader, wonderful human being, just a wonderful person. And when you are in such a situation, maybe we all have been in such a situation, an uncomfortable situation, when you just try to ignore and walk past through it by a chuckle or, just trying to twist the topic or change the subject. And that's exactly what I did. And after spending 15 or so years in the country, being a person of color, coming from a different place, different experiences, I decided to talk to them about it. And I'm so glad I did, because kudos to them. Them and we had a great relationship for me to start this conversation for the very first time in 15 years with them. And I scheduled a one-on-one, talk to them, and I helped them understand on how the comment landed on me and how I knew it was not a personal attack, but this is how it made me feel. And two things happened in that conversation. One is they were incredibly thankful that I told them, and then they were very apologetic. They talked about where they came from. I talked about where I had come from and why this comment landed differently on me than their intention. And we had a great working relationship ever since. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed is I got the courage to address it the right way, and they were more self-aware if something were to happen like that again in future. Now, if you're not familiar with stages of psychological safety, then there's a book, which is a great book by Timothy Leary, very quick read, 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. I don't know. You can see that. Maybe I can remove the background at a later time or get the name of the book. It's called Four Stages of Psychological Safety. And he talks about these four stages that you see on the right. Now, there is a reason on why the inclusion safety is considered as the first step. Any guesses? Right? How long are we going to talk about that? That diversity is great and diversity is this. When are we going to start putting it into action? And that is where inclusion and equity comes in, right? And we all have heard the executives talk about challenges. Why? I wonder, why is it the last step, right? I hope it's sitting with you. I hope I'm landing on you the way I intended it to be. For us to be able to challenge the status quo, inclusion has to be the first step. That is how acceptable mindset develops and grows, right? So here's a short little activity that I would like for you to consider. Let's take a moment and think about our mindset. Think about how diverse are you, right? And grab a post-it, grab a pen, grab a paper, whatever you have around. We'll take 30 seconds or so, and we'll write down. Writing down points of aha moments is all great, but my invitation or challenge or consideration to you is write down how are you going to change that? So I need some action with that. If you're comfortable sharing, great. If you're not comfortable sharing, that is for you to keep and to act upon after the end of the session, beginning next week. Your time stops now.
Can you repeat the prompt, please, Dimple?
Sure. So consider the one in red on each of these slides as the prompt to the activity we are doing. What is the action associated with respect to growing your diversity or self-awareness? Even if it means just one action, what are you going to do about it? Start wrapping up, and I appreciate you spending some time in introspection. So the next activity that we are going to do here is now I want you to start thinking about your teams. And here's your question. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion look like in a team for you? It could be something that you have, something that is missing, something that you're hoping to have in your team. Same website, same code. I believe it should still give you three options: love, fairness, joy, and justice. What else? Theme, innovation, collaboration.
How about empathy?
Empathy. I love that. What else? Feel free to continue if you can think of any new words to share. And in the meantime, let's go back to the discussion on what DEI looks like in a team scenario. Okay, cognitive diversity. If you have not heard of this phrase before, it means diversity in a group. Excuse me, am I still admitting people in here? It means diversity of thoughts, experiences, cultures that form our cognitive brain. The diversity, this kind of diversity is often overlooked in most teams, in most organizations. And it, what I have seen, the reason why this happens is because of two things. One is lack of self-awareness, like we talked about in the previous slide. And the other is, unfortunately, not enough coaching or not the right kind of coaching. So I was brought in this organization back then, and as an enterprise agile coach for that organization. And there was an agile coach already working with the leadership team at the time. And I was asked to collaborate with them because they were a contractor and they were planning to move on in the next 3 to 6 months. And obviously, we started collaborating because we wanted to pair coach for a little bit. So I started asking questions because this is the leadership team that we was working with at the time. And I started asking these questions on what they've done so far, how's everyone doing, and in addition to all these tangible things that they shared, that, oh, I've done this and this is what I'm going to do, and the backlog creation and everything, I started asking him questions about people's personalities, like how are they doing? Because agile transformation, as we all know, is not easy, and everyone is moves at a different speed, and we like to, especially I like to meet people from where they are and walk with them on this journey, dance with them on this journey. So I started asking specific questions about personalities and what are we doing for teamwork, right? Because it's the leadership team we're talking about. They are the foundation of agile transformation for agile transformation to be a success in any organization. And the response I got from them was, oh, all those things are fluff to me. And it took me a minute. It took me a minute. I'm going to be very honest to digest that comment made by an agile coach. So if we do a quick search on LinkedIn or any kind of job site on agile coaches, there are hundreds and thousands of them there, right? And one of the most popular discussion that we have in the agile community is how agile coaches sometimes they become yes people, right? And they want to give the leadership and the organization what they want. So they find these things of fluff, especially at the leadership team. And it's quite unfortunate because these are the strong foundation of any team. Consider when you think of team and when you think of this leadership team who is going through this transformation themselves, you can build a house. I'm looking outside my window, there's a house right there. It's great. Even though I'm not in the construction business by any means, I know that the house can be built up on any kind of foundation, right? But what do you think will happen to that house if the foundation is not strong enough? Right? And that is exactly what this is a very important cost to the organization that is unfortunately overlooked. And why is that a cost? Because what happens when it's overlooked? Quite hibernating, right? Quite quitting, hibernating. People will work only, I just want to work enough that I don't lose my jobs. We've all seen people do that. And when we try to find out why is it always people in question who are at fault? Why is the environment not questioned enough? Would be my challenge to these scenarios. There are so many research and so many studies that relate the bad manager or bad leadership. It's tied to heart disease. So bad manager really are harmful to your health. There is an increased cost of training, of disengaged employees, of retraining new hires, of people not being motivated enough to be innovative. And what happens when it's embraced? We all know that too much change, it just makes us resilient. And that is what Agile Mindset talks about all the time. That yes, with Agile Mindset, we are building resilient teams because we are helping them be adaptable to change, right? Now, putting the flavor of diversity in there with diverse thoughts, diverse opinions, diverse abilities, diverse cultures, diverse experiences that we all have with us. Now, think of that third layer. When does this resiliency help? It helps during agile transformation. It helps during M&A, merger and acquisitions. It happens when there is any kind of org changes. How many times organizations go through org changes and everything is shuffled? What kind of feeling that, what kind of taste it lives and what kind of taste it leaves in everyone's mouth when sometimes these things happen? When you're more resilient, you're more adaptable, right? Changing customer trends. I read somewhere that 20% of Australians, they identify themselves as being differently abled in one way or the other. Now, that led me to think the other day that what would happen if they're building a product like hearing aid, right? So what kind of team are they developing? If everyone thinks the same way, everyone feels the same way, everyone comes from the same place, is just hiring a person who's as a client who has hearing disability going to suffice? Or having a more diverse team supporting those changing customer needs or being more empathetic towards those customer base, being more effective. Employee engagement is being talked over and over again, rightfully so. We need that. We need to increase employee engagement. How many times in town halls and all these discussions we talk about employee engagement? Now, what happens when we leave the room? How much of that is put into action, right? So now let's take another minute or so for introspection. And again, try not to check to your emails or grab a cup of coffee in those 30 seconds a minute, right? Actual introspection. The red board glaring at you in a team scenario. It's great, again, if you put your thoughts on how this slide landed on you. It's great. Do a brain dump if that helps you. But also put some action items on how are you going to embrace diversity and inclusion in your team. And I can share a quick story. It could be anything. It just doesn't have to be a throughput. In one of the organizations, I was brand new boy. So I went to this organization, and the first day, a typical first day, first half of the day, I was spending with the HR, talking about the policies and insurance and stuff. My manager at the time came downstairs, met me, shook hands, left. And lunchtime, we are breaking up, and I'm looking around. The team knows I'm here, manager knows I'm here. There's no one inside, brand new place. I didn't know what to do. So I went into my car and I had a granola bar on my first day, right? Now I was very resilient. So I showed back again the next day. I showed to work the next day. And I spoke about this very, very casually with my manager because my manager and I were very good friends. He was one of the reasons I was there in that organization in the first place. And what I thought was a casual conversation, it just showed me why I had made the right decision because the manager made a big deal out of it and started talking to everyone about that. And it so happened that people started approaching me and they said that, oh, we've been asked to work on developing or re-looking at our onboarding activities, and we would like for you to be a part of it. And that right there told me that yes, they missed being inclusive when I was a new employee, but yes, they're doing something about it. So let's take a moment of introspection and see what is that tangible action item that you're going to revisit come Monday to get your team to be more diverse and inclusive. Thank you. I hope you got something valuable out of your brain and introspection there. And I'm just reading Vasco's comment. I can definitely relate to this in M&A processes. Would you like to share a little bit more about that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So recently learned about an M&A process where the company being acquired was from a completely different culture, and that culture was naturally more inclusive, also because of the place they. M&A means mergers and acquisitions, and they were completely different in terms of expectations, and therefore, inevitably, over time, some conversations started between team members of the different companies that were now joining, right? That were not well received in the company being acquired. And long story short, they had quite a lot of problems as a result of those, and the CEO needed to get involved, and there were a lot of meetings and conversations. Of course, the lack of diversity will not be fixed now, but of course, the company needs to decide, is this something that they want to work on, right? But it was definitely something that affected negatively the whole process of merging these two organizations.
Mhm. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love that. Unfortunately, not all executives at all organizations can comprehend the cost that is tied to lack of diversity. And right there, the example that you give, the CEO having to step in, that is a big cost to the company, just because the teams probably were struggling and they were not resilient and you were working in the cultural teams scenario. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. So now let's take a look at the third dimension and a perfect segue into how that diversity looks like in your organization. So let me bring that up. And this time the code is different. So I am going to paste that code first before I share my screen. The site is the same. And this is the code right here. I'm not sharing my screen, am I? I'll fix that.
No.
But feel free to start typing in. If you're on Menti and if you have this code, then the question is, how diverse is your organization? You should again be given three choices, I believe, to input your answers. Or maybe take this question away in our self-introspection or introspection. Oh, there we go. Words but no action. Not diverse. Surface diverse. Not deliberate. Maybe aware, accidentally. These are some hard truths right there. And unfortunately, it's very common. I wish I could say that it's not really common, but it is very common from what I've seen. So let's talk about how they can be deliberate and how they can be intentional and what can you do about it. A lot of times, and I've been there, a lot of times I have thought about this. Well, what can I do? I can't really do anything about that at that level, right? And part of us, we are not wrong when we feel that way. However, times are changing. We live in a VUCA world. If you haven't heard this phrase, I'd encourage you to look it up. We live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and an ambiguous environment. And pandemic only made it made it worse, or maybe resurfaced, worse or better. I don't know. There were times when we've heard that, oh, we can't survive, we can't work from home, or we can do this, we can't do that. And when we had to do it, we figured out a way to do it in a way in which we don't really want to go back, right? And it's only going to increase in the day and age of globalization. This is only going to be more common, that it's going to be so uncertain. When someone asks me, what is my change management approach on agile transformation, and this is a real story, um, we know that we like to predict and we plan, and predict and plan is something that you might may not have heard to change management approaches. There are a lot of different ways to change management techniques or approaches, and a lot of them are really, really great. But when I just get started working with a company, when I'm still getting to know them, they're getting to know me, and when I'm asked this question like in the second week on, then my response to them is my change management approach is sense and respond. And I've gotten eyes rolls, really? Okay. Are you trying to escape this question? Or do you not know what you're doing? Like, I know what I'm doing. But the reason why I'm saying that is because now you're thinking about mindsets. You're talking about what's going on in people's mind for us to help bring the best version of people that they didn't even know existed, right? And in an organization, the leadership, management, upper management, middle management, they play an important role. And again, this is quite unfortunate, but that's the fact that there is not a lot of diversity in leadership. So there's groupthink. People tend to agree with each other a lot. And groupthink is real. And it's more dangerous when that happens at that level where they help navigate the future or the direction in which the company is moving, right? So, yeah, you can, unfortunately, hiring practices, we hired someone, checkbox, someone said that in the Menti that we were doing that it has to be deliberate. It remains as a checkbox. And think about that house I talked about with not so great foundation. We're so focused on delivering as we should be. We are responsible to shareholders and business users, and we have to be competitive in the market. But we are so focused on delivering that we often lose sight of sustainability. And building a strong foundation is what contributes to having that sustainable, strong, resilient, every word that we used and talked about with respect to mindset. Now, remember the example I talked about this hearing aid. So now I'm thinking that what kind of infrastructure they have maybe in their organization? And these are just curiosity questions, the things that we're good at, right, as agile coaches. So it's just me and my curiosity talking at the time. That do they have enough infrastructure to support people who themselves have this disability, or what do they do? How do they treat their customers, or how do they know that they have been multidimensional with respect to understanding their customer? And that's a huge risk. If there are any blind spots again with respect to serving the customers, then competitors take over just like that. The real story, talking about putting it into tangible results and the cost that is often overlooked by executives or leadership, cost of this diverse and agile mindset, right? When we hire employees, we all always talk about, oh, they are a great cultural fit. Cultural fit is great, but if I'm told that I'm a great cultural fit in an organization, how brave do you think I will be if I see something culturally that I would like to question? So maybe shift to cultural ag, as opposed to cultural fit. You can't just say that, oh, yeah, we are trying to create a psychological safe environment. You have to be deliberate and intentional about how. And that is your question for this one, the last one. If you could take a moment, take a deep breath, and think about, we've talked about whys, right? Start with why. Simon Sinek, one of the authors that I very closely follow, love that. We talk about why. Then we talk about what. What are your pain points? What are the gaps? What do we need to do about it? How always converts into tangible results and metrics and numbers. How can we put the mindset into the how and convert that into action is my question for you this time. Georgina has a question. Can you say that again, please? Develop outward mindset. So could you be a little more specific, Georgina? Are you talking about the last part on the whys and what's and hows? I can get back to that.
You said that you recommended looking at a particular book, but I didn't catch what your recommendation was.
Oh, okay. So yes. So Simon Sinek, Start with Why. The book's name is called Start with Why, and the author is Simon Sinek. So he always encourages leaders to start with why with respect to whatever they're doing. So my question also has been, until I read the book, has been, okay, why do you want to do this agile transformation, right? And especially when I talk about this question with the leadership, a lot of them have no idea, because they're like, oh yeah, it's a popular thing to do. The same thing is for diversity. So why diversity? It's not just because you want to be in the B2B book or you need to be called as the most diverse organization. It's much more than that. So it's same concept for me, at least. It translates into what? So I start asking questions. What are you going to do about it? And what are your pain points? What is it that you hope to see for the desired outcome? And when we talk about how we can get some of those things, intangible outcomes, we have OKRs, we have metrics, we have so many things in that how column with respect to how we're going to deliver. So my question is, can we take a deeper dive into how with respect to sustainability and mindset? How can we take some deliberate action into embracing this diverse mindset or agile mindset?
And if you're listening to us on YouTube, feel free to share your thoughts with me, and I'll definitely bring them to the workshop.
Couple of years. And there are some research actually done by great companies who talk about how diverse organizations often look at untapped market and are better than the competitors, and they're likely to make better decisions because of adopting diverse mindset. Thank you for that question, Georgina. And I hope everyone had a chance for a little introspection there. So my son, when he was 10 years old, Dhairya, I do not remember the context, but I distinctly remember him coming back from school one day, and I had to start sharing some of my experiences with him because his parents are originally from India. He's going to get some of the other experiences along the way, right? And when we were talking about these experiences, my son says, Mommy, everyone carries a backpack with good or bad things. And I was just so proud and like, yes, buddy, we do. But guess what? Those good or bad things, they always stay on our backpack. So remember when I first asked, when you see me, who do you see? And that confrontation that I had with this one person I admired, that had some of the things in my backpack because of which I was driving towards that behavior, and he said what he said because of his backpack, because of the things that were there in his backpack. So I hope that you now are able to do a deeper dive into what the diverse and agile mindset looks like for you at this time. And if I were to ask in 3 months from now, if you can just close your eyes for a second there, take a deep breath, and think about where you want to be 3 months from now on a Friday afternoon, or maybe Monday, not really Friday. What is it that you see? And you know what my next question is going to be? So, what are you going to do about it? Agility and diversity are not checkboxes if they are not accompanied by inclusion and by some actual tangible steps to adopt this mindset. Literally, I feel like there are two pieces of thought. Think about our operating systems, right? In our computers, in our smartphones, we have this iOS upgrades all the time. Why don't we upgrade our mindset and our behaviors from time to time? It's okay. That doesn't really make us a bad person. It actually, I think, makes us a good person. It just shows we are coachable. And we just are getting more empathy when we do the unexpected. So as I leave with you, again, thanking you for your time and hopefully able to trigger your brain cells and heart cells. My question to you, my parting question to you, please take this up back again on Monday, or if you can today, is how are you going to walk your dog? Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dimple.
Mhm.
There was a question in the chat by Serena. Can you check it out?
Yes. So, Serena, would you be comfortable to read your own question, or would you like to read it for you?
Sure, I can read my question. So a problem I've encountered is this. So I successfully recruited a diverse leadership team, but the people that report to them continue to embrace racist attitudes, and it's led to their disengagement. So I'm curious if you have any ideas about how to address that.
I love that question, and thank you for that great question, courageous question we often don't talk about. When I see any questionable behavior, so let me give you an example. So my husband and I, we went one evening for a nice dinner, right? And the waiter just snaps at us, and believe it or not, we often see that we are treated differently at some restaurants. And one such experience happened, and he was obviously, rightfully so, he was extremely mad. And for some reason, my response to him is, you don't know what their day was like. You don't know what they carry in their backpack. So give them some empathy. So my question to you, I guess, question back to the question, and hopefully that'll answer your question, is did anyone try to have an honest and open conversation with them on where they're coming from? We noticed such and such behavior, or maybe we are making assumptions that you are acting in a particular way, especially against this particular person. And I'm asking you in a closed room, just you and I, why? Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. What's going on? You might be surprised sometimes what you might find. That sometimes people don't even know that they are behaving a certain way. Like I talked about this gentleman, that they were completely shocked when I told them on how it landed on me. So I would encourage you, because you've asked this question and have so much respect for you, I encourage you to do the same thing for them. That you noticed your behaviors change a little bit ever since this person was hired. What's going on, man? Did I answer your question? Serena?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking the question. Any other questions that I can answer at this point? If not now, I encourage you to reach out to me in LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to chat with you, connect with you, have a discussion, whatever I can do to help.
Absolutely. Dimple, it's been a pleasure to have you here host this workshop in this such an important topic for all of us, of course. Thank you for being part of this conference, for sharing your experience and knowledge, and giving us your insights. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine, believe me. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks
Thank
everyone
you.
for your time. Have a great weekend.
Vaya con Dios.
And we just finished the workshop on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I hope that triggered some thoughts and ideas for you. We will be joining Dr. Tamsin Woolley Barker's keynote, the keynote that will start in 6 minutes. So I'll take a quick break and I'll be right back to watch this keynote with you. Hello, everybody, again, and we're almost ready to start the keynote watch along. It will start in 3 minutes at the top of the hour, and we will be listening to Dr. Tamsin Woolley Barker about how nature's teams stay agile. So we are going to talk about, or hear about rather, distributed leadership, the origin and what impacts growing trust in organizations. This is specifically interesting for me. So how to kickstart and grow trust in the organizations we work with as agile coaches, scrum masters, and agilists in general. How to grow and protect potential, collective intelligence, and clarity of purpose in our organizations. I would say this is one of the biggest challenges we have as agile coaches: grow protect potential, collective intelligence, and clarity of purpose in organizations. There's a lot of work that we need to do in not only creating that clarity of purpose, as it isn't always clear, but also maintaining that clarity of purpose over time in our organizations. And Dr. Tamsin Woolley Barker will also talk about stakeholder guilds. We'll see what she means. She's going to give us an ecological perspective on agility in our organizations. You can check out the video directly on YouTube, or you can watch it here with us. I would suggest you watch it here with us, and we can take it as an AMA and have live questions from the chat. By the way, if you're listening to this, why not click that like button? And if you like the content, why not also subscribe? It helps others to find this content, others that have the same interests as you to find this content and also benefit from it. So why not do that? It's just 2 minutes for the live keynote. So hopefully we can all enjoy and have an animated dialogue here on the YouTube chat and share our own thoughts and experiences and make this keynote even richer than it would otherwise already be by watching it together. So let's wait for 60 seconds. It's just about to start. Ooh, the excitement. And it will begin shortly. If you like certain quotes from the keynote, why not share them here on the chat? We're just about to start. We have the countdown on.
Well, can you believe it? It's almost all over. We've had 3 days full of amazing content, delivered by people with experience from all over the world. It's wonderful to be able to have heard what's worked, what's haven't worked, and how, as a collective, we can learn from one another to evolve our practice. Hopefully, you guys know us by now. If not, then I'm Helen Garcia. This is Ines Garcia, my co-host, and we have been here for your Agile Online Summit 2022. We have now our last keynote, so buckle up and get ready. Remember that we are using Slack for our community hub for all the sessions, conversations, and connections. So if you haven't yet, then pop over to Slack. There should be a link in the email comms that you've received, and you can get involved in some of the conversations there. Remember, we've got 6 channels. They are all active, and they will continue to be for your future networking, which is very exciting. So get stuck in to meet your peers, share knowledge, learnings, give a big virtual high five and a shout out to those talks and those people that have really impacted your learning over this week. So over to you, Ines.
Thank you. So yes, this year's summit motto is all about evolving our practice. And I have come across the work of our closing keynote speakers through biomimicry, which is the practice of applying nature almost 4 billion years of evolution proven strategies in our designs. And the question of what makes superorganisms super. And mostly, how do we use these strategies at scale? We wanted to bring something different, insightful, food for thought, and yet tangible in the applications in the work that we do. And as our keynote speaker says on her book, Teaming, when a select group of people in charge of choosing which genes and ideas other people ought to have, it's a toxic recipe for human suffering. Conscious evolution is a powerful idea, but you can't presume you know where others want to go with their future. And this is highly relevant. Tansen, thank you for joining us here at the Agile Online Summit. It's wonderful to have you. I am chuffed. So everyone sit back, open your heart and minds to be taken on a journey by an evolutionary anthropologist, CEO at Team Lab and Dean of Geoversity School for Biocultural Leadership. Without further ado, I welcome to the stage Dr. Tansen Woolley-Barker.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. That is actually one of my favorite quotes in the book. So you honed right in on that. So yeah, this is going to be a little different than what you normally hear. It is going to be agile, but it's the way that nature does it. So I'm going to share my screen here for you and let's get started. Right. So we're going to talk about how nature's teams stay agile. So agility, you know, we talk about this all the time, but what is it really? It's the capacity for nimble and effective sense and response. So we're doing this all the time in our work, but we're also constrained by this thing called scaling up. We have this imperative to scale up. You know, we want to figure out the best thing, the best numbers, and scale it up to that so that we can have more profit and impact. So how do we do that? You know, typically we analyze the system, we're breaking it into parts, and we're testing and maximizing all the components, and then we standardize and scale up to that, right? That's efficiencies, Lean Sigma 6, all the things that we do. And then we have to predict and control to make that work. But whose predictions and ideals and assumptions are we actually using here? So you know this in your work, you know, it might be the best number for someone's efficient extraction, but it might not be the right number for yours. And it might not be the right for the customer. And it certainly might not be right for the larger society that's emerging from these things. So what do we get when this happens? It ends up being we work in silos. It gets fragile. We're trying to fix things all the time. So it gets complicated because you fix one thing and you have to fix the problem that comes from the fix, right? And it gets expensive and complicated and there's unintended consequences. And then, you get disengaged. You feel like you can't make a difference or that things are just happening to you. So you lose your creativity and care. So that's the state that we're in and then when you do that, you actually prevent future flexibility. So it gets tighter and tighter and tighter, and there's less play in the system until it breaks. So what do we do when that happens? And I think we're in this phase right now where we're reacting to this. So we're downsizing, we're restructuring, we, issue directives. Okay, everybody, we're going to change the way we're doing this. Total transformation, right? And we tell people what to do and even maybe threaten them or give them great rewards or whatever we do. But increasingly, we're putting more regulations and fixing these nodes so they cannot move. So we're really taking the flexibility out of the system. And then what do? We say, well, if only they knew, if only they had the education, if only they could see it my way, our way, they would know. And so that's what we get into. So, but the fundamental root of this is that the organizational structures and processes that we rely on as best practices are actually restraining our natural capacity to adapt and thrive. This is happening all the time. And we just take it for granted. We think, oh, this is real life, right? Like, get realistic. This is real life. But real life doesn't work that way. So here we have all these diverse species and all this kind of life coming out. We're all related to them. It's all one spark of life 3.8 billion years ago. So all of us are survivors, right? We all got here. Our ancestors got us here. And we have this natural capacity within us to do these things. So, but what's our solution space? It's science, technology, engineering, math. It's this kind of thing. But if you look at these logos, I just did a Google for these logos to see what they look like. But what's missing from them all? Not a single one of these has any living thing in them. So how are we going to solve our problems when life isn't even considered? And further from that, from that premise, you can see that leaders are blind and illiterate when it comes to the way life works. And now we're seeing, if you look in the Harvard Business Review, you see that all these biological metaphors, ecosystems and even artificial intelligence, which is neither one. But, we're going towards these biological metaphors. But the reality is that these are remaining in the metaphorical sphere, that our leaders are really blind and illiterate when it comes to the way that life actually adapts. And why is that? Your MBA doesn't require a single biology class. Your economics degree, not a single biological class. And yet everything we do is biological because we're animals. So what a blind spot. And so thinking further into this, as an anthropologist, you realize that these standard operating procedures that we take for granted were actually imposed on our ancestors to extract their community wealth and labor. That's the situation we're in. And it goes back. It doesn't matter who you are. This is true. The Romans, before that, it's been this slow process of being extracted in our communities. And here we have the results of that is that we operate in these systems that are really not serving us as human beings. So it's become a kind of mission to take what I've observed in the living world and in different species and in humans, and to try to rehumanize our life and work so that we can bring out the potential that we have naturally within us. I mean, all our ancestors got us here, so we got the goods just as much as any other animal. But what is it going to take to rehumanize our life and work? So, if Donella Meadows, the highest leverage points on these kinds of changes are just the processes in which we work and the structures in which we live, but above all else, the paradigms through which we understand the world. So if you're looking at those STEM logos, that's the paradigm we're looking at the world through. It's effective efficiency, extraction, and control, but not the living world that we're part of. So of course we get the same degrading systems that we started with. It just keeps repeating. So we need to see with fresh eyes. And this is my son, and notice that he's looking with a lot of different eyes. It's the plurality of perspectives that allows you to see the system and see it from all perspectives. So when we have this predict and control model, whose eyes are we looking through? For what perspective? For what outcomes? And I think we need to get much more intentional about this. So my journey to this kind of thing is, I was just a kid going, what kind of animal are we? And this is my son. I don't know what kind of animal he is. This is my older one. But I got my start with Jane Goodall because I was so enamored of the way that she humbled herself and she went into their world. She didn't say, okay, I'm going to the zoo and I'm going to study these guys. She said, what is it going to take to earn their respect and their trust to come to me and share that world with me? And so she did that. And that made a big effect on me as a kid. And that's really what I wanted. And I wanted to know, like, here's our closest relatives. And they shed so much light on our own nature. So that was really my guide in my career. And so I was obsessed with living things. I worked in all kinds of field situations, looking at the way that evolutionary patterns work, life's deep patterns. And then I got really interested. So once I figured out the way that life is adapting to change, I wanted to know, what is it about humans that makes us special? And I thought it had to be our big brains. So I actually went and lived on a fishing boat, like a deadliest catch crab boat in the Bering Sea with 25 fishermen, studying whales to see if I could understand how their societies work and how their big brains were helping them do this. But what I concluded was that it wasn't the big brain. It wasn't our big brain that makes us what we are. So I started studying cognitive evolution in humans. And pretty quickly, I could see that it wasn't the brain, it was their societies. So I actually switched my work into looking at these baboons. So I was living in Ethiopia in a tent, a very remote area of Ethiopia, and studying these different baboons. And they were two very different kinds, and they had very different social structures. And the results were very apparent that one of these species had evolved much faster than the other. So I could see that it was their social structure that had allowed them to adapt to change much faster than the other species. So that's something that just stuck in my mind. And on thinking about it further on, I came to the conclusion, some answers about what is human nature. And so our chimpanzee and bonobo closest relatives are very much, their societies run on dominance, right? It's really each one is out for themselves. They do have caring relationships and all this, but in the end, it's every chimpanzee for themselves. But humans are not like this. There's been a fundamental shift in our social structure where we are fundamentally dependent on each other in a deeper way. So where chimpanzees are out for themselves, we help each other, we share with each other. The clothes on your back, did you make them? You know, the food you made, your latte, how many people were involved in getting that to you today? And so we're fundamentally dependent on each other in this way. So we are super organisms, more like ants and honeybees. So that's a radically different way of thinking of our social structures. And so we know that, like, babies, even babies, pre-verbal babies, can understand fairness instinctively. So if you show them a plate of cookies and you share them unequally between two older siblings, the baby looks at you like, oh, what are you doing? They already know that. And if someone needs help and they see that and you don't help them, oh, what are you doing? So that's instinctive in us, and the other great apes don't have this. 75% of the food that foraging peoples eat is not caught by their immediate family. They're catching food for each other. This is very different than chimpanzees. And then the real diagnostic here is that we share half our childcare on average globally, which is really weird because the other great ape mamas do all their own childcare. So this is a fundamental difference. And these are all diagnostic characteristics for superorganisms that are more like, ants and bees. So I started thinking about this, and the other thing is, if you look in the fossil record for humans, you see that we were really taming one another. We removed the most aggressive individuals, or we favored mating with the kindest, most generous individuals, and that now humans are very generous and kind and polite, and we can even ride on an airplane together without tearing each other's throats out mostly. So it's only sociopaths and the most dominant individuals that are still openly attempting to rule through force and fear the way that chimpanzees always do. It's a fundamental change. So we are superorganisms. And so what is a superorganism? It's a colony of individuals that are independently perceptive and creative, and they fundamentally depend on one another. So it's not a clone army like we think of ants. This is every individual is unique and distinct, but they do better by working together. And so there's been selection for this kind of superorganism society in us. So that's our nature. And yet here's where we work. So the way that nature, here we need all these changes made. I mean, we have so many urgent changes we need to make, and things are getting more volatile all the time. And how are we supposed to adapt to them when we have this kind of system? So it's a hierarchical system. And what does hierarchies in nature do? We see them all the time. They do occur in nature, but they're for preventing change. So sometimes, all the time, cancer cells are arising in our bodies, but a hierarchical immune system is going and finding those and removing them. So that's a hierarchical system for preventing change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But that's not the case for us. We have a lot of problems, a lot of situations, and a lot of volatility. We need to be changing all the time. So here's these two models that we've been operating in. Resilience and innovation. These are Native American corn. You can see the diversity in all these kernels. And that's what gives them the resilience. If there's a disease comes, we know with the potato blight, the diversity is what maintains the resilience. And yet we're operating in this efficiency model where we control, we predict, we efficiently extract based on that one number. So you get these monocrops that are vulnerable to parasites and lack the potential for change because there's no diversity in the system. And not only that, but people just don't like it. They don't like feeling coerced and limited in their creativity and agency. And they don't like having change done to them. I mean, people always say, well, people don't like change, but that's not actually the case. People are naturally adapted to change, but they don't like having it done to them. And they don't like being made to work with people they don't trust or like, and in our normal, traditional societies, you would just walk away from people like that. But we don't have that option in our work. We work for who the boss tells us, and we work doing the projects the boss tells us, and we have to work within the constraints of that system. So, for me personally, I got to that point in my scientific career, and I wasn't able to get to the ideas that I wanted to get to within that constraint, because I knew that here as a biologist, life is more than the sum of the parts. But in the work world and in the academic world, I was constantly forced to sort things into parts, analyze, break down, maximize parts. And so I figured I couldn't get where I wanted to go through this. And so I got out of the workforce. I had my own business, entrepreneur. And then, a series of life events, I came back to my biological passions, and I started writing this book, or this manual called the Biomimicry Manual, for a magazine. And it was picked up and it did very well. And I was able to kickstart a new book and all these things. And so that led to all these jobs with these, canopy kind of companies. And so really making a difference on the high level. And I was very excited to bring in these notions of agility and what I knew about living things and adaptation. And so every single time we did these projects, these biomimicry projects, they were totally transformative. The engineers would get so excited. Everybody would be excited. It would be like game-changing things, you know. But then what would happen is I would find that the companies were really not able to use the potential in these things to the degree that they could have. And the reason was because of these structures. They're simply not structured for innovation. They're structured for efficiency. So at some point, they weren't able to do these things. The living systems that we were trying to bring in were fundamentally opposed to the efficiency structures that they were working in. So, you know, and they would get frustrated. We'd see the engineers get frustrated, disengaged. You know, people would quit their companies. So we weren't doing them favors with that. So I started thinking, well, how does nature actually adapt to change? How does nature actually transform? So I wrote this book, Teaming, and I was looking at, you know, okay, if we're superorganisms, how are these other superorganisms adapting? How are they staying agile and resilient and innovative and doing all the things that we want to do? And so, you know, chimpanzees, they are agile, right? They're agile in the trees, but they're also agile as individuals. You know, they're sensing and they're responding and they're reacting and they're very clever. But if you really want to increase that sense and response, that's the foundation of agility. You see a model more like the octopus. So here's this octopus, and it is actually as intelligent as a macaque baboon, which is pretty wild, has the same number of neurons, but they're not in their brains, they're in their skin. And so what they've done is moved the central administration to the forefront of their skin. So each of these receptors is paired with the response. So the reception actually moves to the front lines and the response. And so that gives them this great, you know, flexibility, you know, agility. You think of the octopus, right? But going forward, even more than that, is the bees and the ants and these superorganisms. Because what they're doing is they have many eyes and minds, and they're bringing them all together to create a collective intelligence and a collective awareness, collective agility that is much more powerful than what one chimpanzee can accomplish, or even one octopus. So if you look at this, so, okay, here we are, superorganisms, and you can see some of these pictures are social insects, and some of them are ours, our own buildings. But this signature of intelligence, intelligent design is upon them all. To me, I mean, if we were Martians and we went and looked at our planet, we might think, oh, maybe the ants are little people, or maybe the people are big ants, because it's a similar kind of complex structures that we are creating. But now look how much better at it than they are than us, you know, because here's these leafcutter ants, 0 hours in traffic. And then you look at the Netherlands, 70 million hours stuck in traffic. So that's not agility, right? But these ants are doing that. And then what's the amazing thing about that? Nobody's telling them what to do. It's the structure. That's their strategy. So this is a slime mold. And as I increasingly went into this kind of study, I started seeing these deep patterns in far more than just ants and honeybees. I started seeing it in slime molds and fungal networks underground. There's a number of species that use these kinds of patterns of collective intelligence to achieve the same things that we're trying to do. So I started looking at what those deep patterns are. And you can see here's a slime mold that is in a petri dish, and it has 2 real modes. So one is it doesn't know what it doesn't know. So it's exploring. And when it finds something, it conveys back to the main body, everybody over here. And so then you get a very efficient extraction of that resource. So they have the best of both worlds. It's very adaptable. And so I started thinking, what if our organizations were more like slime molds? without the slime. So how does that work? Well, they're adapting to change quickly. They're resilient to risk, and they're innovating instantly to take advantage of new opportunities. They don't restructure; they just split and fuse, and it's a very natural process. And they don't have any meetings or management or expenses, no annual reviews. There's no corruption, and there's no paperwork. Oh, to be a slime mold. So what is this deep pattern? I started thinking about this. And a scientist probably wouldn't overgeneralize to this extent, but in my life, I've working with companies, I can take a little bit of liberty and overgeneralize and look for these deeper patterns. And it's been very interesting because they really are these fractal patterns in our world. So what are these superorganisms doing? They have many eyes and minds, and they're gathering this value, these little specks of like little scraps of leaves or little bits of molecules of water and nutrients in the soil. The honeybees are gathering pollen, but it's little things. And so they're bringing it together and they're gathering it. And they do it all in different ways, different independently ways. And then they're upcycling it through these symbiotic relationships. So like the leafcutter ants and the termites, they have these fungal gardens underground. And so they're going out and they're bringing all these chewed up bits of leaves to the fungal gardens as a compost. They're actually feeding these things underground, and they eat the mushroom fruit that's coming off these fungal gardens. And similarly, the honeybees are working with bacteria to ferment into honey. Mycelial networks are working with trees to exchange sugars. So it's a deep pattern. And so, but what also happens is then this value, this concentration of wealth, draws all kinds of symbionts. So it's other species that we work with, or that they work with. So the leaf cutters are working with the fungus. But also other symbionts are coming and breaking down that value all the time and keeping it in the territory. So the territory gets richer and richer. Well, we don't do any of this, So what happens is the territories are worth defending because they're actually not just their value is in it, but all the relationships that produce the value. Is all of their trees and their symbionts and their fungus and all these things. It's a system. So that's a general pattern. And what's amazing about this is that nobody tells them what to do at any point. This is, they're diverse individuals. They're doing what they want. They're independent. And together, they're bringing together this collective value. How do they do that? Well, they're all making small, imperfect decisions, and they're course correcting correctly, constantly. They don't know what they don't know. They're just going to the best next possibility. And so really it's the structure is their strategy. And that's what we'll see. So when we're looking at agility and how nature's teams achieve it, these are some of the deep patterns by which they do it. And so this is a framework that I've come up with to describe that deep pattern that we saw of the superorganisms going out, collecting small particles, and they're gathering it together. They find those through collective intelligence, independent individuals searching, but then they collect it through swarm creativity, which is teams, a team of teams. So each of these teams is specialized on something else. And together they have a much broader range of possibility, and it makes them very agile, very resilient, and very innovative. And so what they're doing, they're collecting these raw resources, these little particles, and they're symbiotically upcycling it. And you can see that there's the relationship between the symbiosis and the raw resources, because the raw resources have to be replenished by that cycle. And that's why those symbionts are breaking it down and keeping it in the territory, is replenishing this cycle. So as this cycle goes over and over again, the community gets more and more specialized to the place, and it gets more and more shared identity and purpose. And while that's happening, the outer environment is getting richer and richer and diversifying and creating more potential and more opportunities. So as companies, we're usually focused on that this horizontal line, this collective intelligence and swarm creativity. Functional, right? How do we function to, get the greatest profit and impact? And so we really focus on this, and not so much on this symbiotic upcycling, and generally not so much on this community identity.
So Inez asks on the YouTube if I've tried swarming creativity. No, I don't think I have. Swarming, however, swarming for work is something that we've tried in many teams, and actually very successfully. And what I usually say is that what we really need is a clear goal and a way to measure it. And then we can, as individuals in a team, we can figure out ways to work together to collaborate and reach those goals. So that's not necessarily swarming creativity, but it is swarming. And we need to be very creative sometimes. So I guess one could say it's swarming creativity as well.
And then specialized it towards our own work in our organizations. And so what are we doing? We've got collective intelligence, diverse and unique and independent individuals going out and doing their things. They're working in teams, and together they're gathering those raw resources. And that is what feeds the colony. But to replenish it, they need to regenerate and co-create and co-evolve future possibilities. So this is the piece that we just drop off. So collective intelligence is what allows them to do all these amazing things without being told what to do. So you might have heard of honeybee democracy. So here's how they make decisions. So these honeybees, let's say they need to find a new home. So what do? They actually, the scouts, go out in all different directions looking for places. And when they find one, they'll test it out. Is it big enough? Is it safe enough? All the things they need. And then they fly back to the hive and they do a waggle dance. They do this little dance. It's a figure 8 dance. And it actually tells the other bees what direction to go for this new home, how good it is. And if they like it a lot, they'll do a lot of dances. And so other bees are more likely to see it. And if they see her vigorous dance, they'll actually use her little code to tell where to go and how far, and she'll go and check it out for herself. Now, bees will never vote for a site they haven't seen themselves. They don't share the news without reading it. So, and they don't go for fake news either. But what these guys do is, so it ends up, they'll come back and they'll do this dance, and then more bees will see the dance and fly out for themselves to check it. So what you get is this noisy dance floor of bees dancing for different sites. And they're all going at once, kind of an honest competition. But at some point, because those better sites are seen by more bees, because she does a more vigorous dance, those sites amplify and the poorer ones fade away. And at some point, there's a tipping point and the whole hive will fly to the new site. And so that's how they make decisions. And that's, you compare this to the way that we choose our leaders, through elections and things like this. We might look more at something like this. And here's the ants. They use similar kind of means where if they find food, they'll drag their abdomen along the ground and create this trail. And so other ants that are wandering around come across it, and that tells them there's food in this direction. So they'll go do that. When the food runs out, the trails run out. They dissipate. And so it's these behavioral shifts that occur in this way. So there's really no consensus. It's a tipping point quorum sensing kind of process. And they use these stigmergic signals. So here we are, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. That's not what they're doing. They are simply laying tracks in the atmosphere, in the environment that trigger others going, okay, this is what's happening. This is the big picture. How could I help? How could I join in? And so it's much more like this. And then these simple rules and tipping point shifts that you see, like with the honeybee democracy. Like everyone's doing this very simple thing. They're having an honest competition of ideas, and then there's tipping point shifts that just determine it. And the crazy thing about the bees is 85% of the time they choose the best home. So this is a very effective process, but it's also very low computing power. And it's a great solution to things like the traveling salesman problem. So then let's get into this swarm creativity. So what's going on these teams? They're leaving little seeds of ideas. You know, a termite might put a little blob of sand on a wall, and that triggers others to put a blob of sand next to it. And maybe if there's 5 blobs in a row, they switch to making arches. And so again, it's this tipping point trigger system that has these cascading effects. And very complex things can happen through these means with nobody telling anyone what to do. It's just the way we like to work. So some of those deep patterns for collective intelligence that we can be thinking about in our own organizations is, well, obviously shared purpose comes right to the fore, as they're self-organizing around this shared purpose. And they can do that because the shared purpose is really deeply inherent in them. They're doing multiple parallel low investment experiments all the time. And some are, amplifying and some are decaying. So that's something we could be doing in our organizations. And we're facilitating these always on conversations. You mentioned the Slack channel. That's our Slack channel right there. And then these simple if-then rules, which we can begin designing. So what's required for this collective intelligence to go to work? Well, the individuals have to be diverse. And we think of them as a clone army, but that is not the case. It turns out that no 2 ants are statistically alike. Like they're more different than we are from one another, which is crazy. And I've talked to ant researchers that can identify individuals by their behavior. So this is a myth that we have. So they're very diverse. They're all independent. They communicate transparently, and they have this body of shared rules. And that enables them to do these very complex things. So how could we cultivate this kind of thing in our own organizations? And more mentorship and development and education, just helping each other. And then, experimenting, tinkering, hands-on experience. And of course, that's the foundation of agile technologies is this, try again, rapid prototype. And then, but if everyone's got to be diverse and independent, you also have to have the psychological safety for humans. We've got to have that belonging. Otherwise, people don't speak, they don't contribute, and then you don't get the collective intelligence. You get, more of the same. And then the other thing is this idea of belonging that we're so lacking. We need to cultivate this idea of we're a we and you're special. We need you uniquely and you're one of us. And so those are things that we just miss in our lives so much. I think so many people are feeling a lack in these things. But this is really the root of the collective intelligence that allows us to do these things together. And you have to share the costs and benefits equitably. That's a major sticking point for us in our organizations because some of us are getting 350 times more than somebody else, right? So, that the bees aren't doing that. The queen she's not a ruler. She's not getting more than anyone else. She just has her own job. So here we are. We've focused on this collective intelligence and this swarm creativity, very functional things. And it's all about getting these particulate raw resources and feeding that organization again, or that shared identity. And again, we're really neglecting this symbiotic upcycling. So how do we do it? We do it in these team of teams. And that's the way we like to work too, these team of teams. But if you've ever worked in a high performance team, you know that you don't tell people what to do. There's no control. you are growing individuals' capabilities and becoming really aware of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then there's a lot of communication of, hey, I'm open, I'm here, maybe some strategy, but basically everyone shares the purpose. And so they know what to do on their own. So the same is going true for the superorganisms. They're wandering around foraging for work. They get recruited into projects. You know, it's a much more free kind of approach. So the diversity is key to this, and diversity is the key to all of this. It is the raw feedstock of evolutionary potential. It's a raw feedstock of all life. And here is an example. This is a local example where I live in San Diego, that these water fleas, they live in these ephemeral pools. And so in the summer, you know, the pools dry up, but when the rains come, these little eggs hatch and they just go to work like crazy. And they're all females, they're all clones, and they just eat and eat and eat. And that's what they do. But when the water starts to heat up and dry up and the food disappears, they switch to sex. They start making males. They start having sex and cross-fertilizing, creating diversity. And so, you know, that's our agile route. When you need to change, you need more diversity because that's the potential of what's available to you. So how do they do that? They increase it through exchange and recombination. And so this is an ant colony. What they do when the rains come, the perfect rains, they do these nuptial dances. So the virgin queens all fly to the air into one place, and all the drones in the neighborhood fly to that place, and they're having a mating frenzy. But the queens, these virgin queens, they have to mate with 6 different males to have enough diversity to maintain their colonies. And we see, you know, like in bees, this colony collapse disorder, a lot of that is due to this loss of diversity. And the other bees just disappear because they know the diversity is not there for the colony to survive. And like we said, that other part is that diverse belonging. It's not just a matter of being diverse, but you have to feel like you belong. This is a terrifying picture. And the shared purpose. And then the equitable sharing of work and wealth. Because why would you do something that someone else gets all the benefits from? You know, that starts to be parasitic. So here we go. We're moving into resilience now because, okay, agility is great, but there's more to it than that. You know, really, we were looking for more than agility, I think. We're looking for a certain layer of resilience and adaptability. So how can we take that to a higher level? And you can see with this team of teams structure that these superorganisms use, it keeps them modular and flexibly linked and right-sized and multi-purpose and redundant. And that gives them the resilience to deal with all kinds of situations. So that's another key to their long-term adaptability. Naturally resilient in these small units. And if you think about that, you know, here we are designing the Walmart way. It's all one size fits all. It's, you know, it's going back to that extraction of choosing the best number and scaling up to that. But in reality, in life, in real life, life grows in these little cells and little patches, and it is structured. So, and that is naturally resilient. So that's adaptability. Those come from those things. And we also think about, you know, if you've been in a situation where it is agile, where you're working with people and there's a flow, there's this natural flow, and it feels like you tapped into something, you know, and that's really the way life works. It's a dance, and all these individuals of different species are exchanging. They're exchanging their abilities, their energy, their matter, all kinds of things. So it's really a matter of flow. And so here's an example from biomimicry. This is Pax Scientific, and this is Jay Harmon's work. And he was an Australian surfer. And as a kid, he spent a lot of time in the water, and he saw that energy seemed to flow in these spirals everywhere. He saw waves going this way, saw shells going this way, and the flow of kelp and all of this. And so he thought there must be something to that. So what he did, he actually froze a whirlpool and created a fan from it, and then some impellers and a variety of things that stir. And it turns out that these are now, with the many iterations he's done, 85% quieter and more efficient than the fans we've been using. And of course, fans are everywhere, everywhere. And so this is a major breakthrough. But what he found is that by studying the flows of living things and the flows of our world, we can design much better, because these are much more effective, efficient processes. So you start thinking about this flow. And so 85% improvement, this is the same kind of thing that's going on in every aspect of our lives. We're losing this much potential because we're designing through something instead of with the flow. So you can see that in our organizations too, how much we lose through this control process that we do. I mean, it's hard to let go of the control because of the uncertainty, but the flow itself is, possibly 85% more effective and efficient. So what it really comes down to is this potential energy. And physicists are always talking about this, that there is some energy in the system that wants to become, a rock on top of a mountain, it wants to roll down. And so it contains that potential energy. And so that's what living things are always doing, is looking for potential energy and surfing for free on it. And that is like, the impellers and these things, is they are actually looking for ways to flow for free. And that's the kind of thing we can be doing as well. So here's one example with other superorganisms. So here are these Namibian termite mounds. These are amazing. These little termites make these mounds, and they might be 30 feet tall. And they are actually their air conditioners. The actual colony lives way below. But what they're able to do is, this is the Kalahari. It's very extreme weather, super hot in the day, freezing at night. But they manage to keep these things within 1 degree Celsius all year long, all day long. And they use, it's all passive. And so here we are trying to do the same thing in our cities, and it's taking 20% of the world's energy to do the same thing. So, and that's that 85% we're leaving on the table all the time. And the same is true in our organizations with the way that we're designing. So now we get into, we've got agility, effective, nimble, effective sense and response. And we've got resilience, which requires adaptability in general, capabilities. But now, if you really want to take it further, you start thinking about proactive measures of like, what can I do to change what's going to happen? Or what can I do to, innovate? We're always looking for innovation in companies. But what novelty can I add to the system that creates value? So this becomes very important. But when you look at the way that life does this, it's quite different from our own, where we're going, oh no, there's a problem, I need to fix it. I create a patch for it and I stick it on there. And so we're getting these rickety patchwork systems that have lost their flexibility because of regulations. They're all fixed. There's no play in the system. So, and we have this idea of evolution as survival of the fittest, right? But in reality, life is avoiding wasting energy and life on competition. So these are these walking palms in Panama. And if they lose the light above them, they just walk away. They walk to another little patch. So they're actually avoiding it. They don't fight to keep their patch. They just, go to the lowest hanging fruit, right? And so how does that work? It really comes to the amount of diversity that is available. And so here's how this works. We know that, it's not like Noah's Ark with two perfect animals of each kind. It's populations of diverse individuals, and they can be very different. Selection is occurring, some of them are getting eaten more often than others, and the whole population shifts one way or another from that relationship. And then what happens, like these are Darwin's finches, by them pursuing and avoiding competition, they're actually diversifying. They're becoming more and more different and unique to avoid wasting the energy on competition. And that's how evolution occurs. So we can apply these kind of deep patterns to our work to design for potential. So I like this image. This is a family tree, of evolution. And we have, at any one time, we have all of these possibilities going on, but one of them might explode into a whole new bunch of possibilities. And so we want to be there. We want to be in that spot, finding that one thing that explodes into a radiation of new possibility. And that's that designing for potential, what could be. And a lot of times that's partnerships, that's working with relationships. So what life does, it's not solving problems, it's finding the next open door. And you can see this kind of process fractally on our world. Like water rolls downhill, and it's the same thing in everything we do. So what happens is, as these organisms become more and more unique and specialized to their roles, but they still have the same needs, right? So they end up exchanging with others. So, let's say I'm a bee and you're a flower. We need to work together for both of us. I pollinate your flowers, and you feed my colony. And so organisms are actually investing in each other all the time for this reason, and they have to grow trust and capability to do that. So this potential oriented design versus problem fixing is what grows our capabilities and grows possible futures, and it creates these radiations of possibilities and grows the opportunity space for a wide variety of organisms. So in here you see the fungal networks underground. Originally, plants couldn't really get onto land because they had these feeble roots. And so the fungal networks underground actually partnered with them and enhanced their root system so that they could go onto the earth. And now look, 95% of the plants on earth are supported by this relationship. So this is really the foundation of all the abundance on our earth, is these kinds of processes of exchange and investment in that exchange. So it's these generous assumptions that grow life's abundance. And of course, we can't work this way because we all have different salaries. We all have different, competing for promotions and these kind of things. So this is difficult for us, and yet it's our nature. So I was talking to maybe Vern Harnish. He's the scale up guy, but he was I gave this presentation to him, and he said, well, but isn't the leopard a problem for the gazelle? Does life really not solve problems? So we talked a lot about this, but if you think about it, the leopard is shaping the gazelle and the gazelle is shaping the leopard. Because if we were to keep the leopard, if we were just to hand him gazelles on a platter, he would become fat and lazy and no longer be a leopard. The same is true for the gazelle. If we were to put them in a cage and keep them safe, they would get fat and lazy and they wouldn't be a gazelle anymore. So both would decline and degrade, and the whole system would decline and degrade. So it is shifting your perspective from that of the gazelle or the leopard and looking at the whole system. That lets you see how we are shaping each other and honing each other's capabilities and really investing in each other. So life is always growing these conditions conducive to life. So what are the 3 things that life requires to increase this potential? So there's 3 things. It's diversity. It's got to grow the diversity because you can't create something new. You need those a body of diverse mutations and variations for selection to act on. And you need that exchange. There's got to be exchange going. And what's that require? Well, it requires trust, and that is capability, reliability, and reciprocity, like fairness in your exchanges. So these things are always going on. And then the third is the opportunity, is that they're investing in their partners in order to grow the opportunity space for their own offspring in the future. That's how life's working. So here we go. Here's these 3 things they need. The diversity is the limiting factor. The amount of diversity you have determines how much change and how rapidly it can occur. So that's foundation. And the exchange, again, has to be capable, reliable, and reciprocal. And then the opportunity space. All these animals are looking for food or shelter or mates or partners, just as we are. So these are the things that living creatures are investing in for each other all the time. So I would ask your listeners, to think about some of these things in your own work. Is what's restraining diversity and its expression in your work and in your organization? And what results from that? What do you see happening because of that? And then you can also think about what would it take to increase that diversity and its expression? And what would it look like if it was reduced? What would you lose? And so you can be thinking about those things. And then exchange. You can be thinking about what is restraining exchange in your organization. So what's restraining it between individuals and departments and disciplines and stakeholders? And what are the results of that? A lot of times we're seeing hoarding of information, we're seeing silos, we're seeing communication breakdowns between different disciplines, all those things. And so what results? And then again, what would that look like if we were to increase or reduce it? And what would happen from that? So this can give you a little bit of broader view on increasing potential for transformation. And then the third one is opportunity. So here's how living things are working. So this is from Glacier Bay in Alaska. And what happens here is this glacier has been receding, climate change. And so what it's doing is scraping the ground. And so it's bare ground, it's just rocks. So first off, the little lichens come in and mosses, and they're actually creating soil. And so now some annual weeds blow in and they can make a living in that soil, but there's not a lot of infrastructure in there. There's not a lot there. So as they start increasing the capability of this place, now perennial weeds and grasses can come in, and that's really stabilizing the soil. And then you see the fungal networks are coming in and providing infrastructure that's tying all these organisms together. So then shrubs are coming in, and then they're like act as nurse plants for larger things. So now trees are coming in. And if you were to keep doing this, like in a place like, in the temperate forests, you get these monocrops of all pines or all one kind, and they're very tall. And that's a mature ecosystem for that place. So one of our specializations is disturbance and innovation. So we do things, and our ancestors do things to create more potential, and they actually just make disturbances that generate it. So you have to know your nature and purpose and know your context if you want to grow into these unique roles. And when you do, like this is a coral reef. So the coral is a coral animal and it partners with an algae. So the algae creates the sugar, photosynthesis, and the coral's creating a home for it. And they work together. And that has created all of the coral reef abundance. And so we see this in every ecosystem on the earth, is this diversity and these systems, and they're all feeding each other. And together it's growing the opportunity space for more species to find more ways to make a living in it. And you can think of these guilds, which sometimes we talk about stakeholder capitalism. And this is really getting at this, is all these different creatures are taking on different roles in the environment, and they're all needed. And so we can actually start growing guilds of stakeholders that share a purpose, and that can really increase the capability in our systems. So here's one I love. This is called the adaptive cycle. And I use this a lot with companies, big companies that have a lot of projects going, but also in communities or industries where you have a lot of players. So what you see in any environment is that these low investment opportunists come in first. So if you think about that Glacier Bay example, this bare ground. So these little opportunists are coming in and doing what they can. And pretty soon, more things are coming in. And so that's paving the way for these longer term investors that are, creating infrastructure. Well, what happens is these trees get bigger and block out the sun, and there's no more space for seedlings. So resources are locked up. And you can think of, like college graduates coming out in a recession. Like there's just simply no opportunity for them to get started. So what's required is disturbance. So like the Native Americans and the Australian Aborigines, they're using controlled burns to open up new space. And they were doing that consistently to create these patchworks of opportunity. And elephants and beavers do this too. And the elephants were actually knocking over trees, and they created that savanna that our ancestors expanded into. So you in your work, you can be thinking about this. It's like, where is my project at? Where is my company at in an ecosystem? What is the ecosystem of my industry? And what state are we in? What states are our different patches in? And so how can we increase that? So sometimes you need more adaptability, sometimes you need more creativity, but sometimes you need more efficiency and resilience. So both are happening all the time. And what these ecosystems do is they just do little patches in different states so that organisms can move between them and they can enjoy all of those possibilities. Increases diversity of possibility. So what's required for all of this is equitable sharing and trust. But we are kind of prevented from this because, look, we are competing for salaries. We're competing for promotions. Even in grade school, we're competing for grades. And then we're also so limited. We've got report lines, our information silos. We don't really have a sense of we. Who's we? And then because of that, we don't even see each other and develop each other. So if you think about like foraging societies, they would wait for the kids to grow up and say, oh, I see this amazing thing in you. And then they would develop that. And then you would be initiated into the rights and responsibilities of that society. And that's the way that human beings like to work. But we've erased all this in our companies. So we don't really have those ways of preserving psychological safety or growing trust, or we really just don't have those structures. So trust becomes super important. And like we said, it's the complementarity, the capability, and the reliability, and the reciprocity. of the individuals. So we can look in our own organizations and say that, where is exchange between all these different individuals and departments and disciplines and stakeholders? Where is that being restrained by the lack of capability or the lack of reciprocity or the lack of reliability? And we can invest in our partners to increase that. And that's something we don't really think about, but that's like the stakeholder capital, where we can really start to be thinking about creating super organisms out of industries and ecosystems. And so it's very hard for us to do this work currently because we don't have the information and belonging and permission. We don't have the recognition. We might lack the experience. We don't have the mentors. Certainly, there's no space for imagination in so many of our work. It can be crushing. We lack the agency and belonging and hope and interest that we need to make these big changes. And why? It's because we can't have an effect. It's that hierarchical system and the freezing of nodes through all the regulations and rules that we put on. So there's no play. We can't make any difference. So why try? And so it actually gets to something more fundamental that I think is really, really fascinating. So we've looked at this general framework, and we can be thinking about this in any organization of what are the relationships between these things, and how can we increase them by thinking about them. And that's a lot of the consulting work I do is around this. But now here's what happens. All superorganisms, because they have this abundance, they have this abundant wealth, they are super susceptible to parasites. So parasites are coming in and they use deception to do that. They actually will use propaganda pheromones to trick the colony into thinking they're being attacked, and they go around in circles, and the parasitic queen just dives down into the nursery and eats all the young. Or even worse, grabs onto the host queen, sterilizes her, and the workers keep feeding her and helping her produce her own eggs, and then the whole colony takes care of them. So what this is doing is they have taken over this swarm creativity and basically imposing host labor. So it turns that because they don't really want the members, the parasitized members, to think for themselves. They just want them to bring them these raw resources straight to the parasite. So you can see this whole superorganism pentat has collapsed. So they don't want anyone to think for themselves, for sure. They don't want any independence. So efficiency, you want to restrict that and tell people what to do. But you can see now that this has really damaged the shared identity. But what happens now is that because there's no interest in caring for these symbionts and replenishing these nutrients, the waste starts to accumulate, and then the raw resources disappear. And then the parasite moves on, to another colony or another planet or whatever. So this is a really kind of awakener, I think, looking at this, because it's so similar to our lives and in the processes that we're, dealing with. So I think we're looking at having a parasitized mindset that we need to counter in our lives and work. So what has to change? And it's the systems, it's the structures, it's the processes. Rehumanizing life and work so that we can be the adaptive humans that we're meant to be. And a lot of that comes down to our sovereignty, our independent thought, and freedom of action. And so that's what we're trying to get more of in our organizations. But it's interesting, if you watch foraging people, they're fiercely egalitarian. that you will be exiled for ordering someone around. It's just not okay. Everything has to be shared. Everything has to be respectful of one another. And if you look in the other superorganisms, they're doing the same thing. So what we see in there is with ants is they roam around in these little trios. That's not always, it's a team of teams. So these small teams are linked. And so what they do is each of these teams has two workers that just go to work. But one of them is a leader, which is more active and wandering. So they're actually wandering around and they're meeting the same guy that's wandering around. They're all women, actually, females. And so that is knitting this whole fabric of teams into one purpose, one shared purpose, one shared calling. And so this leadership takes a different form than what we're used to. So like the queen, she's not the ruler, but her first job is to gather diversity. And then she makes this pheromone, a royal pheromone that is like a signature scent that everyone in the colony shares. And then we know that we can trust each other if we share that. So she does that. She spreads it through there. So that's distributed leadership. Her entourage is doing that for her. And then these little, the leaders that are distributed are actually suppressing dominance and inequity. If like in honeybees, sometimes bees will start laying fertile eggs, which is kind of a violation of their social contract. And other bees will come along and remove them. So it's this distributed leadership where they're holding this space for each other. And they're knitting all these little teams into one purposeful whole. So this distributed leadership becomes super important. And we even see it in our close relatives. So our closest relatives are the chimpanzees, but also these bonobos, which are lesser known, peaceful little chimpanzee type beings that live in the Congo forest, right? Shy. And but what they do, the males would love to be the bullying role, just in the chimpanzees, same thing. But they cannot do it in bonobo society because as soon as one of them tries to push around a female, she calls for her sisters and they shut it down. And it keeps everyone more equitable. Everybody does better. But we don't see that in the chimpanzees, but we see it in the bonobos, equally related. So this is within us. So I think of this leadership, this distributed leadership, and it looks different in social insects than it does in a male chimpanzee, alpha male. Like our leaders don't need to know everything. They're facilitators, they're gardeners, they're links, and they're maintaining these commons that we require of psychological safety and diverse expression, these kinds of things. So these are the things that our leaders need to be thinking about if we want to use these social or these superorganism models for ourselves to achieve the agility and the resilience and the innovation that we're looking for. So we've got to start growing and protecting unique potential, which means seeing each other, developing each other, doing that for each other. But why would we do that with salary differences? So there's basic structural changes that would need to change for that. This collective intelligence is like, you got to grow diversity, got to grow independence, and psychological safety so people feel free to express it. And then really that strength and clarity of purpose is what draws everyone together. And then creating these spaces where helping and sharing add up for everybody. So equity is really important. And that, of course, comes down to trust. So these parasites are everywhere. We know that our best practices are kind of a legacy of parasitism. But other superorganisms are dealing with parasitism all the time. So they have very clear ways of dealing with it. And they're doing it all the time. preventing parasitic entry, much like our passwords and that kind of thing. But they do it in a distributed way. And what they also rely on is transparency. So they make it very difficult for parasites to operate in secrecy and deception. And then all of those kinds of parasitic tactics they're using, they jam them. So the way, like, for instance, we have Facebook with all kinds of parasites coming in, trying to convince us of things, to make us do things. The superorganisms would shut that down very quickly. So here's our, I went back to this. So the interesting thing to me here is we have to bring back this symbiotic upcycling. And it seems like kind of irrelevant in our companies, like what, growing trees? What does that have to do with anything? Or, our relations with other organisms. But it turns out that not only is that done by individuals in collective intelligence, this is our individual relationships between like art and gardening and hiking and, spiritual activities and things like that. And together, this is what restores our shared identity or, and the shared purpose. So companies have completely neglected that, but they may find that this is the thing that allows them to tap into collective intelligence and swarm creativity. So they don't have to tell people what to do. And so then we can adapt very quickly. But you can see that it's very modular and small. We can't scale up these Walmarts and things like that and get these kinds of effects because we can't maintain the trust. We can't keep track of it. And so the coevolution, with each other and these stakeholder guilds and then also with other species that we depend on is really the thing. It's this coevolution is what's increasing the potential in the future. And by doing that, we can feed all kinds of ecosystems and grow potential for all of us to do more in our lives and work and to be more connected to meaning, things that are meaningful to us and our children and our communities. And all of these things come, from life that you can see all around you. So I hope that you can get outside, take a walk, hug a tree, and think about how these kind of processes might play out in your own organization or your industry, or inspire you to grow some stakeholder ecosystems that can really change the world. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Wow, so much to, I love to have tons of time to discuss much of what you cover. One particular thing that resonated with me a lot is this idea of hierarchies are flowing the way that we're trying to use, right? That it restricts us to be able to adapt because it filters out rather than enrich abundance. The structure feeds culture. Right now, I'm on a biomimicry practitioner research myself sort of around boundaries and our artificial boundaries and how that looks like. This idea of rehumanize what we do, like human nature. Well, it is nature. Yeah, so many things I love to ask you. Just looking at time, perhaps we can follow up in Slack. I know you've been doing like really interesting work as well, like the trios and how that applies from some of enterprise.
Oh yeah, yes. And actually we've been working with like Cisco and trying to implement those into software platforms, and maybe these can get spread, and I hope that becomes the water we swim in.
Yeah, it's not only create institutional knowledge, but extend it. And yeah, those things are much needed in enterprises. One piece of advice for the audience, some which are completely new to some of these concepts. So if you were to start all over again in the corporate environment, which sort of advice would you give yourself?
If I was to start all over in the corporate environment, well, that would be very hard for me, but what I see is that that these things are actually very easy to implement. I mean, you can do it completely apart from the main, from the administration. It can be a separate layer. It can be self-organizing. So you can, you can put it out there, hey, anybody interested in this? And you can start creating your own little trios that are kind of creating another layer in the organization. Because we know like all these fixed points are preventing our adaptation, but we can get around them with informal networks that we have. And so I think it comes to bringing out those informal networks and highlighting the things that we know, but that we don't know we know, because we have so much value in our networks that we just don't know we have. So I would go into the new corporate environment with looking for ways to kind of layer trust and place and regeneration with these kind of networks, like deep networks that are global that we already have. So can we superimpose them, and also I think can we tickle them from the inside a little bit, because people are so frustrated of like, oh, what can I do? But you can. You just need a friend that gets it, and a third one maybe that wanders around looking for like-minded souls, and you can create these knitted fabrics that kind of are like a ghost scaffold underneath the organization. And I think eventually it'll flip because it's way more effective.
From networking to not working the network.
Yeah.
Helen, all over to you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, what an amazing closing session, Tamsin. Thank you so much for your time today. And we hope that this year's Agile Online Summit, has been a blast for everyone. We've certainly enjoyed hearing so many different points of view, so many different ways of working, and we'd just like to say a really massive thank you to all of our sponsors, our track leads that have been so supportive and being able to help us make this happen. They've been a hit. And also to our keynotes, Johanna Rothman, who kicked us off, Anu Golpold, Linda Aspley, and of course, Dr. Tamsin Willibarker. Thank you so much. We will be back, so watch this space and continue to get access, like I said in the beginning, to the Slack to meet others, or if you've purchased a ticket, then an access for lifetime to the content that we've heard this year, which is pretty cool. And now bring on the weekend as it approaches us at all different times of day. Get up,
Do bring on
have
the
a
weekend
stretch,
for sure.
and we look forward to seeing you next year. So let's do this.
All right, and it's done. We have gotten to the end of the Agile Online Summit. It's been a great adventure and, of course, a great learning experience for many of us. Certainly for me, I've watched most of the videos already as I was part of the team editing the videos, and definitely a blast. Oh, there we go. There we go. And thank you all, the viewers on YouTube, for participating in this adventure. This was the first time we did this live streaming on YouTube. If you're watching, why not give us a comment? How did it go for you? And of course, do click subscribe and like on the video if you liked it. The conference will be live for a couple more days, so if you want to watch some of the sessions, they will all be freely available on YouTube until the end of November 6th, Sunday. And then after that, they will be available to those who have purchased a VIP ticket. And you may ask, how do I purchase a VIP ticket? Well, that's a great question. Let me show you. So if you go to the main webpage, you can click Secure Your Seat Now, and you will have the options. There's a free sign up. You, of course, have have complete access to the content until the end of the weekend that is coming. Or you can get the lifetime access to the summit videos for $69. Or if you want to have access not only to this year's summit, but also to the previous year's summits and a lot more, you can purchase a only 1 year subscription to the Oikosofi Scrum Master community and get all of the content, not just the summit, but also the books and all other events, plus videos, the Agile Online Meetup videos, and a lot more in the community, in the membership site that we have for the community. Once you have purchased the ticket, you can easily access it by logging into the VIP area. Everybody that has purchased the ticket will have gotten an email with the login details and can therefore log in. That's all for me and from the team at the Agile Online Summit 2022. It's been a blast. It's been a pleasure to be here with all of you, and I look forward to seeing you in maybe, why not, in May for the Scrum Master Summit, and definitely next year for the next year's Agile Online Summit. So hope you enjoyed the weekend. Hope you have time to watch some of the sessions. And if you have the VIP ticket, of course, you can watch them calmly next week and share your thoughts and comments that they're in the VIP members area, where you can also put some questions, and we'll try our best to answer all of those. For now, thank you very much. And I'll go, as Helen said, I'll go and take a stretch, because I've been here with you guys for 2 hours and 40 minutes today. So it's a pleasure. See you after the weekend. Bye-bye.